Welcome to the Agoura Hills Planning Commission meeting of March 5th, 2026. At this time, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. If you wish to speak or submit a written comment, please complete a comment card for each agenda item and submit it to the secretary before the public comment portion of the item. I will now call the meeting to order, and we will start with a pledge of allegiance. Commissioner Sharon, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, please stand.
Thank you. And I will now defer to the secretary for our roll call vote.
Good evening. Commissioner Platzer,
Present.
Commissioner Roth, Commissioner Stein,
Present.
Vice Chair Sharon,
Present.
Chair Reinhardt.
Present.
Chair Reinhardt, you have a quorum with Commissioner Roth absent.
Thank you. Commissioner Roth has submitted a request for an excused absence. Do I have a motion and a second to approve his request?
Commissioner Sharon makes a motion to approve his request.
Commissioner Stein seconds.
Thank you. I will defer to the secretary for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon,
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt.
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval 4-0.
Thank you. And now we will move on to approval of the agenda. Will the makers of the motion and the second to approve the agenda state your names?
Commissioner Stein makes a motion to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Sharon seconds.
And I will defer to the secretary for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon,
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt.
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval 4-0.
Thank you. This section is reserved for public comment for individuals wishing to speak on items not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. If you have materials to distribute to the Commission, please do not approach the dais. Instead, provide them to the Secretary for distribution on your behalf. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Individuals addressing the Commission shall refrain from disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. I will now defer to the Secretary.
Thank you. There were no written public comments and no speaker cards have been submitted.
Perfect, thank you. We will now move on to the consent calendar portion of the program. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items on the consent calendar. I will now defer to the Secretary.
No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions from the Commission on the consent calendar? All right, hearing none, I will now call for a motion and a second to adopt the consent calendar.
Commissioner Stein makes a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
Commissioner Platzer makes a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
Sorry, seconds the motion.
Thank you. I will defer to the Secretary for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon,
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt.
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval 4-0.
Thank you. We will now move on to the public hearing. Our next item is to conduct a public hearing to consider the adoption of a resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance amending regulations related to accessory equipment in residential and commercial zones and uses subject to director's review and approval in residential zones. I will now open the public hearing and defer to Associate Planner Eric Wong.
Good evening, Chair Reinhardt, Commissioners. The item before you this evening is a zoning ordinance amendment for accessory equipment and residential uses. This is also known as PZ 2025-121 ZOA. So for tonight's agenda, we'll just be going over the background of the zoning ordinance amendment, discussion of the actual information for the zoning ordinance amendment, CEQA considerations, and staff recommendation. So starting with the background of the zoning ordinance amendment, in 2025, council goal setting identified some issues pertaining to our zoning ordinance. These issues included inconsistency with our climate action goals and undue burden on homeowners due to the inflexibility of the language within. So council directed staff to bring amendments pertaining to address these issues, including residential equipment and other minor revisions. In general, the process for a zoning ordinance amendment, also known as a zoning text amendment within our code, section 9805, starts with an initiation. In this case, it was initiated by council, which then directed staff to prepare a report to Planning Commission for a public hearing. This is what we're doing right now. And after the public hearing is properly closed within 21 days, the Planning Commission can either recommend council adopt the zoning ordinance as drafted, or recommend adoption with modifications, or recommend rejection. Once the recommendation is sent to council, within 40 days, a similar cycle happens where council has to open a public hearing, and then after the closure of the hearing, action within 21 days. This would pertain to approval of the zoning ordinance amendment as drafted, or with modifications or disapproval. So starting with discussion on the accessory equipment portion of the ordinance amendment, it touches on two types of equipment: exterior wall-mounted equipment and ground-mounted equipment. Concerning exterior wall-mounted equipment, currently all wall-mounted equipment is disallowed in residential zones except for two types explicitly listed, as stated in section 9132.1G. No equipment in residentially zoned property shall be mounted to an exterior wall of a building. In addition to this, due to the rules of interpretation of our zoning ordinance, and the fact that newer types are not listed in our ordinance specifically, that remains to be seen that newer types of equipment are just not allowed technically within our code. Similarly, for ground-mounted equipment, newer types are not captured or mentioned in our code, so they're, again, technically disallowed. But for the ones that are specifically allowed pertaining to mechanical equipment, City Council has found it to an extent too burdensome to comply with the requirements as suggested in 9606.1, specifically pertaining to screening. So some just examples of equipment not captured within our code that are newer. These include tankless water heaters, emergency battery energy storage systems and generators, and heat pumps. So currently allowed specifically for mechanical includes your typical mechanical equipment such as HVAC or pool equipment. However, this equipment has to be screened on all sides by a wall or fence, which could be cost prohibitive in some cases. In addition, they can't be put in front of the property. For wall-mounted equipment, as mentioned earlier, there's only two types that are allowed. So that would be a flat plate collector for a photovoltaic system or air conditioners. And again, because there's not much clarity within the non-capture types because they're not discussed explicitly within our code, there's no path for determination for what's appropriate and what's allowed between staff and applicants, which creates some uncertainty. So the ordinance amendment being brought kind of addresses these issues by changing the language in sections 9132.1 and 9606.1. For ground-mounted mechanical equipment, the screening can now be waived by the director when deemed appropriate, and it can now be, just in general, ground-mounted equipment can be located in front of the property if it's visibly screened from public view and if it's placed outside the required front yard setbacks. For wall-mounted equipment, some are now explicitly allowed, so we increased that list of allowed equipment, but we've also added a provision for non-capture types of equipment just to a bit future-proof it, just in case anything else changes later down the line. This would, for non-capture types, this would be a staff level determination and be only allowed to be placed in the rear yard as long as it wouldn't create a public nuisance. So the next few slides are just examples of what you see throughout the city currently. So this one is in Stonecrest Patio Homes. As you can see, their HVAC is mounted at the front of the property. Technically not allowed under our current code, but with the amendments as proposed, it would be allowed if properly screened. This is an example of a tankless water heater. I believe this is from an ADU conversion. This is technically also disallowed on our current code, but would be allowed pursuant to our proposed code, as long as it meets the set standards as well, including setbacks. And this is just an example of emergency battery energy storage system, just a backup battery. Again, because it's not explicitly mentioned in code, it's disallowed, but would be allowed with the zoning ordinance amendment. But it would also will have to meet other technical requirements for health, safety, and welfare reasons, such as the fire code and building code. The second portion of this ordinance amendment pertains to uses within the RV residential district. So currently, there's two sections that list allowed uses for director review and conditional use permits. Section 9222.3 lists all the uses in the RV zoning district that are allowed by director review. So this is an administrator hearing, which could be possibly escalated up to planning commission, but it doesn't directly go to planning commission first. And then section 9222.4 lists uses allowed by conditional use permit, which does go to planning commission directly. The zoning ordinance amendment concerns two types of uses currently listed in 9222.3, so that's the director's review. One being commercial riding academies and stables, and the other being private recreation clubs. So concerning commercial riding academies and stables, due to the prevalence of private streets within the RV zoning district and the considerations for circulation and evacuation impacts from commercial riding academies and stables, staff believes it's more appropriate to just move that use from 9222.3 to a planning commission hearing for proper scrutiny. Concerning private recreation clubs, the actual definition of a private recreation club matches that of a homeowners association. And the fact that an HOA is allowed without a permit in all other residential zoning districts without review, as it's not directly a use of land, because of that, staff believes that it's more appropriate to just remove that use from this section entirely, including 9222.3 and 9120.17. Now for the discussion for CEQA, this action would qualify for exemption, specifically the common sense exemption under State CEQA Guidelines Section 15061B3. This is because adopting a municipal code text amendment has no possibility in resulting in a significant effect on the environment itself. So any individual projects in the future that would include these zoning ordinance amendments within its actual physical project would be subject to individual CEQA review when necessary. So for the recommendation, staff respectfully recommends the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance amending sections 9120.17, 9132.1, 9222.3, 9222.4, and 9606.1 of Article 9 of the Agoura Hills Municipal Code to clarify specific ground and wall-mounted equipment requirements and to amend uses subject to director's review and approval in residential zones and make a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. With that, staff presentation is finished and staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. I will now defer to asking, does any commissioner have any questions of staff?
Yes, Commissioner Stein has a few questions. Obviously, like generators are now people are installing them because of power outages. They're very noisy. So I'm just concerned, are we looking at also a noise ordinance, like when it comes to installing a generator, or is it just now being certain setbacks and maybe having it enclosed in a certain way? So I'm just trying to get some clarification on how that will work. And then, other things, the picture has helped a lot, but I'm more concerned, like I have neighbors who have generators, they come on, they go very loud. I mean, I don't see them, but I hear them. So I'm just concerned, is there a noise ordinance with generators? I'm not sure if it falls under safety and security or not.
So for generators and just in general noise creating mechanical equipment, they would still have to comply, operations would still have to comply with our existing noise ordinance. So enforcement would be complaint basis usually for that. But in addition, we do, for the ordinance, the zoning ordinance amendment itself, the suggested change in language also addresses this by requiring still screening when determined appropriate. So just in all to say that generators, when you're operating them, still have to comply with our existing noise ordinance.
And just to clarify a little further as well, all noise generating equipment requires screening on 3 sides. So that's an existing provision, and it's also in the new code amendments as well. What we did change is that if you have existing conditions that would make it so that you don't really need the screening, then the director would have the ability to waive the screening requirement. So it is still baseline required.
Okay, because I've seen, people on their side yards, they've got a fence, they've got the wall, but the generator's sitting there, but it's still 3 feet away from their side wall. Now, would that comply, or are they gonna have to then put enclosures around it, which I've been told also could cause issues with how the generator operates, because it's not getting sufficient air movement. So I just want to make sure we're thinking about these things, and
Absolutely. We do require screening, especially if it's adjacent to a neighboring property. There are certain scenarios where the director may choose to waive it, for instance, on very large lots where it might not impact adjacent property owners, but if it's right along a side lot line, then it would be required to be screened. We have a certain decibel limit that property owners aren't allowed to exceed at the property line. And that's in our existing noise ordinance as well.
and then the only other real question I had is regarding the riding academies. If there's an existing facility, is that grandfathered in now?
It'd be legal non-conforming. Yeah. So it would be able to continue.
Okay, I'll defer any other questions to my other commission.
Do you have any other additional questions of staff?
Would the owner require a permit to put in the generators, or automatically they could put in the generators?
So typically, yes, unless it's like a mobile generator that's not on a pad, but typically for residential emergency generators, they require a building permit.
So for example, one that would be fixed, like a Generac or something like that, those are still subject to the same rules and regulations, and it would be similar to like an air conditioning unit as far as what needed to be covered and the pad and the setbacks from the home and all of that. So this is just making sure that there is consistency among the land use and among the ancillary, things that would be attached to the dwelling.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Sharon, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. What are some non-captured equipment types that you just said that, but you didn't give examples? Can you just share a few examples?
Yeah, so I just pull up the slide. So examples include that tankless water heater fixture right there mounted onto the wall, and also technically emergency batteries. Like this is,
Okay.
yeah, like a
Okay, so
backup battery.
got it. Okay, so those are. Can you explain what captured means, just so that it's clear?
Of course. So when it's non-captured, it just means it's not discussed within the code itself, whether it's disallowed or allowed.
Okay, and so is the verbiage going to stay with non-capturing as new technologies come out? Are we going to have to update the code, or are they just going to fall within this term?
So that provision specifically it's a kind of a catch-all. So like if something new and fangled comes that we didn't really expect, it's already captured within our code as part of that all allowed in the rear yard without any nuisance. But should any like provisions that required it to be inside or anything else along those lines, commission could always come back and revise the code if need be.
Okay, understood. And then, in section 4A, you do talk about, that a we're adding that ground-mounted equipment will not be will not be allowed in the front yard setback. If that is where a resident's current equipment lies, are they gonna be required to move it when they, let's say their HVAC goes and they wanna put a new one? Are they gonna be required to move it at their expense, or are they like grandfathered in, or is it because they're replacing the unit, they are no longer grandfathered in unless they fix that specific unit? How does that work?
So it would be existing non-conforming, so they would be allowed to just replace in place.
Okay, so if a resident needs to get an entire, just to be clear, an entirely new unit, they throw the old one out, they put a new one in, they can keep it in that spot without having to deal with the expense of relocation.
That is correct.
Perfect. Okay. I think I am good. Thank you.
To follow up on that, though, they would need to conform to covering it so that it wasn't visible.
No, so if it's already uncovered, then it could just remain uncovered. It would just, because that's part of that existing non-conforming use.
Okay. But we can always suggest,
Correct.
okay. Thank you. Okay.
9132.1G says, except as allowed by section 9606.1, no equipment in residentially zoned property shall be mounted, affixed, or otherwise attached to a pitched roof, including a hip or gable roof, or to an exterior wall of a building, excluding windows. What does that mean? Excluding windows?
So that's to just, those window-mounted AC units? That's kind of that, like, carve-out for those types of window AC units. But to answer that 9606.1, it just says that it will, if it's not mentioned explicitly in 9606.1, which we have that catch-all in that section as suggested, then it would just comply with 9132.1. So the window exception is just for like a window mounted AC unit. That's like you can remove and put in typically.
But you could put something larger, right? I mean, not just a little unit on a window, correct?
Theoretically, yes, but if it's like larger than the window, then usually that creates damage to the window. It's pretty theoretical, but I'm unsure whether that would be possible. Defer to Robbie on that.
Yeah, and that carve out for the window is generally because in a lot of circumstances, we actually have to allow the window mounted AC units. And so that's why the code is the way that it is. But just to be clear, we're also not changing this section of the code. The portion that we're changing in this section is just to make it consistent with the other section that we're changing.
Vice Chair Sharon?
One last thing in section 4A. We're adding an insulated fence, a sound insulating fence. Was that not required before, just kind of a visible block? But now we're actually requiring a soundproofing block?
That's correct. And typically, solid blocks do kind of insulate usually. They also sometimes bounce back noise, but that's very technical. The sound insulated fences should just clarify the purpose of that fence and why it's there.
Perfect, thanks.
Are we've been satisfied with our questions? Okay, okay. Thank you for answering all of our questions, Eric, I appreciate it. I will now defer to the secretary for any public comments. If you have something to distribute to the planning commission, wait, did I skip through? Okay, I'm good. All right, sorry. I had lost my place there. Okay, if you have something to distribute to the Planning Commission, please hand it to our secretary. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker.
No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted.
Thank you, appreciate it. Before closing the public hearing, does any commissioner have any additional questions of staff? Okay, hearing and seeing none, there will be no further questions. I will now close the public hearing. That's pretty good. Okay, I didn't drop it, I promise. Okay, so now we will move on to deliberations, and I know I started last week with Commissioner Stein. I'm going to start in this direction, and then we'll go forth. So, Vice Chair Sharon.
Sure. So, I really appreciate you guys taking the time and effort to make our this ordinance very much more user-friendly for our residents, making things, you know, we gotta update with the times and the technologies, and I like the idea that we are kind of setting ourselves up for not needing to edit this too much in the future. We have a lot of language that kind of, as technologies come about and new things come to market, we're kind of prepared for it, which is, you know, I really like seeing that. And a lot of my concerns were answered in the presentation, so I am good and I can make all the findings. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I will now defer to Commissioner Platzer.
Well, I just want to say I spoke to staff, and I want to thank you for the presentation. I think it's time we need to make upgrades, especially with, you know, the power going out and people getting Tesla units, so I could make all the findings.
Commissioner Stein?
Yeah, you know, I looked at, you know, the ordinance, and you know, what I'm like about it is it modernizes our zoning regulations, reduces unnecessary barriers, and it does support our climate and efficiency goals, and it's still protecting our neighborhood character. And based on all that, I can make all the findings.
Wonderful, thank you. Just to echo my fellow commissioners' thoughts, thank you to staff for your excellent preparation and making sure that we had all the materials needed. And Eric, you did a wonderful job of really getting into the nitty-gritty. And one of the things that stuck with me about this is the intent, and the intent is consistency. And the intent is to make sure that the character and the consistency that we've had within the city continues, and that as these new things emerge, that we have a way to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So I really appreciate all of that. And the other thing that stuck with me was the term future-proof. And I think about the fact that legislation is always challenged with trying to keep up with the times, and there are obviously multiple schools of thought on this, but having the ability to think forward, but also still have some guardrails in place that if there's some crazy contraption that comes out that we need director or planning director or planning commission to review under CEQA, that there's still that carve out within these rules. So thank you. So with all of that, I too can make all the findings. So with that, I will defer to Assistant City Attorney to read aloud the staff recommendation before we vote.
So just to reiterate, the staff's recommendation is to adopt a resolution recommending the City Council adopt a zoning ordinance amendment, amending sections 9120.17, 9132.1, 9222.3, 9222.4, and 9606.1 of Article 9, Zoning of the Agoura Hills Municipal Code, to clarify specific ground and wall-mounted equipment requirements and to amend uses subject to director's review and approval in residential zones, and make a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA.
Thank you, Travis. I will now call for a motion and a second to approve staff recommendation.
Commissioner Sharon can make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Commissioner Stein seconds.
Thank you. I will now defer to the secretary for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon,
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt.
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval 4-0.
Wonderful, thank you. I will now ask, are there any additional comments from staff? Okay, hearing none. Are there any additional comments from my fellow commissioners? Okay, hearing none, I will adjourn this meeting. The next regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for 6:00 p.m. on Thursday, March 19th, 2026, in the council chambers of the Civic Center located at 30001 Ladyface Court in Agoura Hills, California. This meeting is now adjourned. There we go.